So as you can see here, we've got two separate parts and I can move between them, and you can go and do like a verse-chorus type of move. Unlike a lot of other loopers, however, the Infinity allows you to take actions precisely at the loop boundary. So just to clear this thing out real quick. Now I've got both loops free. Here's a super simple example of how I can just go between, I'm going to put one chord on the first loop, and I'm going to put the 4 chord on the second loop. Just super simple, something like this. Going until I tell it to go to the other loop. And stop. So by having actions occur at the loop boundary, it allows you the flexibility to focus on your playing and play leads or develop melodies or whatever else have you on top of the original loops that you put down. Another really great application of the two-loop phenomenon in using the loop boundary is to use an AABA jazz-style form. So I'm going to go ahead and give you another example now, probably with a little less echo on it, using the AABA format. I'm just going to clear this out. Okay. Back to the top. So this would be an AABA format, and that was an original song of mine called Japan. So moving on, there are a number of differences between the two units, of course, the Infinity 2 being considerably smaller and more affordable. Some of the elements of the bigger one are, of course, still superior in that while this one loops for about 5 minutes, the other one loops for 8 hours. And while there were a number of features that got added over the years to the larger unit as we did firmware updates, this thing comes fully baked with all the knowledge that we acquired over that time. And one of the coolest features that we were asked to implement on the original unit by a bunch of our customers was the concept of loop aging or loop decay. And this is a process by which the old loop material fades out as new material is added. And in the way we do it is that loop aging only occurs when you're overdubbing. So you can create a loop, freeze it, then when you start overdubbing, depending on where you have the value of the loop decay set, the old material will progressively fade away. In the Infinity 2, we decided that this feature was so hip that we wanted to give it its own dedicated knob. And this is a little unusual for a looper pedal to have this, and effectively turns it into a form of a delay pedal. But it also allows you to do a whole bunch of really interesting things where a loop can evolve considerably over time, and then if you elect to use the undo feature, you can actually then snap it back to where it used to be. So one of my favorite examples of using the loop decay is with a very short loop. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Again, I got to clear out the Infinity 2 here. So when using the remote switch option, you can push and hold the stop function to clear things out without having to hear the little burst of audio, much like the paradigm of the Ditto looper. The Pigtronix Infinity 2 puts all the functionality of a looper on a single foot switch, which means push to record, push again to play back, and then double press and hold to clear. So moving into the very short loop with loop decay going. So I'm going to turn the decay knob on the Infinity 2 way down and just create like a super short thing, and to show you how this can kind of bounce around like its own kind of unique little delay pedal vibe. So what sounds like a delay pedal there is actually the Infinity 2 in overdub mode with the decay knob turned pretty far counterclockwise, allowing the old material to go bye-bye as I do new stuff. Now I'm going to do another version of this technique where I utilize the undo, redo feature. So to get to undo mode, you push and hold the little switch, turns on the light. Now the secondary foot switch on the Infinity 2, instead of being loop 2, a second loop, now it's going to give me the undo redo functionality. And so here we go. We're going to create a loop, let it start decaying, and then ultimately snap back to the original loop. Tap a little tempo. If I put it back into the playback mode now, the loop will not decay. It just plays. But again, if I hit overdub, now the loop decay comes back in and starts fading out the old stuff. So, I also would like to now go through a few of the other alternate modes for the Infinity 2 second foot switch. All right, so we've seen that it can create a second loop so that we can have a verse and a chorus and go back and forth, and it even switches automatically at the loop boundary for you, so you can bother yourself with playing more melodies and musical development rather than having to absolutely nail your timing every time you want to go between loops. We've also seen that the second foot switch can be used to create an undo and redo situation where I pull things away and then I can add them back in and just hit the switch, and that's what happens. So the next thing I can do here is I can actually have the left foot switch act as a dedicated stop switch. And there's 3 ways to use it. When I'm playing a loop, if I hit stop, just hit it quick, the unit will stop at the end of the current loop. If I hit it twice, the unit will dead stop in its tracks, stop immediately. And if I push and hold, the loop will actually fade from the point at which I hit the stop switch until the end of the loop. We'll create like just a quick little progression here. I think I stole this from Tom Bukovac from his homeschool and YouTube channel. This is something about the power, the minor 5, the 5 minor. Anyway, here we go. Actually, turn the loop decay back up here. This is just going to be to give you an example of the stopping. Now I've triggered a stop. Right? And it happens for me. It stops for me at the end of the loop. Now, by way of example, I will do an instant stop. Double press gives you instant stop. So single press, stop at the end of the loop. Double press, stop right away. And then, of course, the very glamorous push and hold to fade. I'll do this a couple ways. I can push and hold on the last chord and get a nice short fade, or I can push and hold right from the beginning and get a really long, dramatic fade. So the shorter fade would be this. That was not a great example. So this way, as you can see, I can hit it in the middle of a phrase, and if I wanted to then keep playing, you might not ever even have known that the loop stopped. So again, that would be your short fade at the very end. Okay, so that's a stop mode. Next is one shot. Okay, by pressing again nice and quick on that little switch on the front of the pedal, we're now assigning the secondary foot switch to be a one-shot mode. What that means is that if you hit it quickly just once, the loop will play back just once. If you hit it repeatedly, it will actually cause stutter playback of the loop. So we can do that with this initial B major chord. Now it's going to stop for me at the end. Which is kind of nice. So when you have the one-shot mode activated, you've got this kind of cool DJ-esque sort of da-da-da-da-da stutter thing you can do, or you can have a loop play back with a predictable endpoint, of course, at the end of the loop. Now, moving on, the next thing we have, you heard me, if you were tuned in right at the beginning of the live stream, you heard me using the octave function. This is pretty fun. It's a digital device, so obviously there's a sample rate, and by toggling the foot switch when you assign it to change octaves, actually changes the sample rate of the machine. The default sample rate is going to be 48 kilohertz, and then when you hit the sample rate, it drops in half. And that means that any audio that you previously had recorded, if you recorded up at the higher sample rate and you drop it down, the audio will go down 1 exact octave. And if you recorded initially at the lower sample rate and then you toggle the octave, then everything goes actually double speed, so it goes up 1 octave. There's a couple of little tricks that we built into this. You have the option of toggling the octave shift right in the moment, so you just hit it once and it'll go, no matter where you are in a loop. You also have the opportunity to push and hold on the octave button, and what that will do is toggle the sample rate shift to occur exactly at the loop boundary, and I'm a big fan of that. Now, another thing you can do with this machine is actually toggle the sample rate while you're recording. So you can manipulate the sample rate in real time as you're recording, so your loop comes out all crazy with the loop jumping back and forth between the sample rates, or you can actually push and hold on the octave foot switch while you're recording so that when you play back, the audio will come out manipulated, and the sample rate shift happens exactly at the loop boundary. That's pretty fun. I'm not sure exactly how useful this is, but right now what I've done is I toggled the sample rate button so that now I'm down in the lower thing, and you know, if you're not up to full speed, you know, you can just go ahead and you know, play your fastest licks and then change your sample rate while you're recording them and then play them back and it goes even faster. So right. So, most people may or may not employ it that way, but I did want to make that opportunity so that you could literally shift sample rate or tell the machine to do so at the loop boundary. Alternatively, if I record at the higher sample rate and then crush this thing on the loop boundary, we get something like this. So, this can, of course, also be done mid-loop. So if I record material and then change the sample rate and then record more material, we wind up with different parts in different octaves. I suppose by way of example here, we might do something like this. You get the idea. Anyway, that one was just a bit off the cuff. So that takes us through the sample rate shifting and the different ways that we can manipulate things in the Infinity 2. The original Infinity also has the sample rate shifting functionality, but actually spans a wider range of sample rates going all the way up to 96 kilohertz. So you can actually take your recorded audio and jump it up an octave or down an octave, or if you've recorded at the ultimate high sample rate, you can drop things as far as 2 octaves and vice versa.
So we have a question from Lex.
Lex, what's up, Lex?
We want to know, is the octave shift just up or 1 down, or is it possible to go 2 octaves on the Infinity 2?
So on the Infinity 2, you can only do 1 octave in either direction. The original Infinity, not only can you do 2 octaves in either direction, you can also have the unit change the sample rate by predetermined musical intervals, so that you can actually shift the sample rate by half steps, by a fifth, by a fourth, by minor thirds, and do some really bizarre stuff. It can actually also have the sample rate changed via MIDI, so that if you have a MIDI keyboard, you could like sample yourself and sample a pad on the guitar or some synthesizer in one key, and then actually shift which key that pad plays back in by triggering the sample rate changes via MIDI. So the original Infinity, while it is a little older, does contain some of the super advanced, really hardcore features that you can't get in the Infinity 2. So the answer is, if it doesn't do it, the bigger one does. The MIDI functionality of the original Infinity is pretty deep. It has a lot of different things it can do, and I was planning to go through some of that a little later in our clinic here. The Infinity 2 does not feature MIDI. What it does feature, however, that is found in the original Infinity is the extremely low latency. When we set out to create the Infinity series of loopers, we wanted to solve a couple of problems that we saw in the looper technology that was available from our other manufacturers in the space. And for me, the number one issue is latency, things not responding accurately and in time, and even more importantly, that every action that was important should happen on the downbeat. I call it the James Brown theory of looping. Everything's got to be on the one. It's on the one. I learned that from my friend Bootsy Collins. He taught me, Dave, man, you got to get on the one. So the Infinity is very much on the one. Rather than have lots of different actions that are dependent on push and hold commands, we have all of the critical recording actions that are time sensitive, so to speak, that it's got to be right on the money. All of those actions are triggered on the down press. And this is different than the way that a lot of the other manufacturers handle the recording of the initial loop. Rather than, on our behalf, rather than try to quantize or figure out the rhythm of what you're playing or try to match things or slide things around, we've gone with a frame rate of about 1 millisecond. So the Infinity Looper and the Infinity 2 are resampling every millisecond, which is blazingly fast. So when you press down on the switch, it's not waiting for you to pull your foot back up to decide whether to record or do this, that, or the other thing. It acts instantaneously. And then, specifically with the Infinity 2, switching between loops, once you got that first loop nailed, everything happens for you. And that's the beauty of it, whether you're using the series loops from the Infinity 2 or the same function on the Infinity 1, or even the parallel looping on the Infinity 1, where loop 1 is a certain length and loop 2 can be many times longer. And once you open it, it will run however many times you want and then close by itself. And it's totally dependent on that first loop being really accurate. And if you're accurate, the Infinity will capture that, because it's just looking for a down press. So that's really what sets us apart, is the extremely fast sample rate and low latency operation here, and the very short frame rate that we work with to give you a transparent experience when you're trying to loop. Then there's, of course, also our audio quality. We have developed a proprietary analog front end that's on these units that preserves all the integrity of your guitar signal and allows you to pass things out the back end sounding exactly like what you played when it comes out as a loop. And that's, of course, really, really critical for Pigtronix, in that we strive to, create pedals that expand your sonic palette, but do so with integrity and not degrading your signal and turning your nice guitar and your beautiful pedals, the loopers usually last in the chain, having that not turn your signal to a pile of garbage is very important. So both units have some really well thought out audio architecture that allows you to sound excellent when you're looping. There's also some interesting I/O. On the new Infinity 2 pedal, it's full stereo. I love to use stereo effects and stuff, so you got 2 inputs, and you got 2 outputs. But you also have the option, if you push and hold this little button at startup here, it'll actually boot up as a wet-dry routing, which means that your dry signal goes out one output, and your wet signal, the loop audio, goes out another output. And it'll even sum the two inputs if you want. So you could have two signals, it sums them for you, sends the summed clean signal out of one output and sends the loop audio from both channels out the other. And that can be really helpful for live performers, especially if you're working on big stages, which hopefully we'll all be able to get back to sometime soon, is that you can run your loop audio only to the front of house, and or your drummer or other bandmates, or have the front of house run it back through the monitors, so that these guys can, the fellow musicians that you're performing with, can listen to the loop content without having to be blasted over the head with your raging guitar solo that, of course, you're playing over the loops. Also, since the original Infinity has the MIDI synchronization, it can take MIDI clock, you can actually have your drummer sending a click, or a musical director, or a DAW, or even your own delay pedal, sending the MIDI clock signal into the looper so that its actions are actually cued by the band, and that then they can monitor pure loop audio, and your playing in real time that's not being looped is reserved just for you. There are also, of course, lots of folks who like to run effects after their loops, and by having a wet-dry routing scheme, you can go ahead and run reverbs and delays, of course, modulation, whatever you're feeling, after your loops, and run them to separate amps or combine them later, however you like to do it. So wet-dry is a feature on the Infinity 2. On the original Infinity, we have a option to send loop audio only, summed from both channels, out of a dedicated auxiliary output. And that's a built-in feature. And that was really intended originally as a drum monitor or front-of-house loop audio monitor. Since it's a bigger unit, there's more room on the chassis for adding the extra jacks for features like that. What else do we have here? We did the various modes of the Infinity 2. We talked about the overall design philosophy of this thing. I always liked to think of the Infinity series of pedals as very much like a tape machine in the spirit of Les Paul. So it doesn't do time stretching or anything like that, but it will speed up and slow down and react to you in real time. So we did the, let's do split mode. So there's one other feature that's worth mentioning on the original Infinity that is an interesting feature we call split mode. Since it has two loops, you can set it so that the loop 1 input records to loop 1 only, and the loop 2 input records to loop 2 only, so that if you have maybe like a bass synthesizer or whatever, you can have that bass synth being looped just on one of the two loops and separate them, which can be kind of cool because you can drop things in and out, that's getting into more of the parallel looping found on the original Infinity. So before we get into the more advanced MIDI control and anything like that, I suppose it might be time for like a little more guitar playing. Jeremy, we cool on that? Yeah. All right. So let's do, let's put this back to that. All right. Okay, that's another one of my tunes. It's called My Soul, as it were. So, next up, we'll talk a little bit about MIDI. Now we're really talking about Infinity 1. Infinity 2 don't have no MIDI. But Infinity 1 has MIDI, and it does a slew of interesting things via MIDI. I'm just going to go into it a little bit today, and then we can get into it a little bit deeper at a future date. The first thing I wanted to show you was just using a MIDI controller to talk to the original Infinity. I have here, I probably should have set this thing up over there since that's what the looper is, but I've got kind of like a longer MIDI cable, and I've got this Nectar Pacer thing over here. And this was something we actually put together for Phil Keggy at one point. When he saw how big this thing is, he suggested maybe we should put some wheels on it and use it as a skateboard. But what it does do is allow you to keep your Infinity looper and potentially lots of other things in a rack off the front of stage, and just use this thing to send MIDI commands with a single cable to control not only the features that are on the front face of the looper, but also some of the deeper stuff like the pitch control and doing moves like erasing the loop that is not currently playing, which I did several times in that last performance there. You'll notice that sometimes here I'll be creating a verse, creating a chorus, and then to create a third part, while one of the loops is playing, I actually double press and hold to erase the loop that is not playing. To do that on the original Infinity, you have to use MIDI. It's built into the Infinity too. But anyway, just by way of showing off what we can do here with the original Infinity, we'll go back to a clean sound. Just basic controlling of the loops. Loop 2. All right, I think we had a little camera battery issue there, but I was just messing around with the MIDI and the reverse and the pitch and turning loops 1 and 2 off independently while they were running in parallel and just having a little bit of old school Infinity looper fun. So even if we lost picture there, I hope we didn't lose too much of our audience, and I hope you didn't lose your sense of entertainment. Hey, it's about the music anyway. So MIDI, not only can you control stuff with it, so you can control the things that are on the face of the pedal, as well as lots of stuff that's not on the face of the pedal. So if you really want access to everything the original Infinity does, you definitely can take advantage of a MIDI controller to do that quickly. It's pretty easy to program, and the manual is pretty chunky, so there's also a interactive website manual that will teach you about as much as you need to know to control the Infinity via MIDI, should you wish to do so. And one of the ways that I use Infinity with MIDI is with the MIDI clock. And that's critical for when you want to get your timing really, really nailed. Now, there's 2 ways to do it with the original Infinity. You can use a DAW. And if you're using something like Pro Tools or Logic or whatever, and you just send MIDI clock out, as long as you start on the downbeat of a given measure, the Infinity will actually use the start and stop points from the DAW to actually open and close loops. It can take time signature change commands, but it defaults to 4/4. Essentially, you know, it'll start the loop on the 1, and then you tell it when to close. And the way that we work it is that when you hit the stop switch or the loop switch to close a loop while MIDI is running, it will close at the end of the current measure. So if you're in 4/4 and you are playing along, what you want to do is you want to close the loop somewhere after the 1 and before the and of 4. And as long as you close the loop somewhere in that measure, the machine will wait until the measure is over and then close it for you. So that's pretty handy. The other thing that you can do here is you can actually clock the looper using a delay pedal or some other tap tempo source. In this particular case, in my pedal board, I have a Boss effect switching system that just routes my other pedals around, but it also has a MIDI clock internal. So I've got this upper right-hand switch set to tap tempo, and that actually sends the tempo out to a number of different devices, my delay pedal, my Eventide H9 for the Leslie and all that, and then I have the option of sending that clock signal to the looper. Now, a critical thing if you're going to use something like a tap tempo source or a delay pedal to clock the looper is a function called AZR. This is Auto Zero Record. This took a little while for us to figure out when we were creating the pedal. The fact is that your delay pedal doesn't really know where the 1 is, nor does it care. It's just creating a rhythm. So what the AZR function allows you to do is that the Infinity looper will listen to the MIDI clock signal coming in, and then when you open the loop, that redefines the 1. So the looper's sitting there going, okay, it's counting the clicks, and then it doesn't really matter what it thought was the 1. The moment you step on to open the loop, that defines the 1, and then all the rest of the normal rules apply. When you go to close the loop, you close it, and then the loop will be finished at the end of the current measure. So I actually I didn't bring my MIDI merger to do this clinic. I'm very sorry. So I'm going to pull the MIDI cable off of the Nectar MIDI controller, and I'm going to plug it into the output of my Pigtronix Evolution 2. And so that's going to start sending the MIDI clock into the looper, and I will attempt to demonstrate this for you guys. Should be hopefully very interesting. Okay. So MIDI clock output from the Evolution 2. And this will give me a sense of where my delay is at. And you always know that there is MIDI clock going to the Infinity looper when you see the arm light blinking. And it just shows up automatically. You send a MIDI in and it just instantly starts blinking. If you don't see blinky, then you're not sending clock. So anyway, that is the MIDI tracking functionality of the Infinity looper. One of the things that this pedal, that we had to do to make this work right, is make the looper track any errors that are coming from the MIDI clock. A lot of old drum machines and even a lot of computers will spit out MIDI clock that is not totally consistent. It has what is called jitter. And the Infinity looper watches for that jitter and then drops frames in a way randomly where you can't hear it to keep the looper on track with the MIDI clock. We've actually had this thing synchronized to MIDI clock for over 3 days at one point, and it's sample rate accurate. So there's a lot of really powerful functionality if you are looking to have things be rock solid, on tempo, and have all your loops clocked to a very precise clock. The one thing that you do want to do is you want to run for a couple of measures to make sure that the Infinity is totally in sync with it. That is largely what I had to share with you guys today. I suppose the one thing I haven't mentioned about the original Infinity is that it does have an expression pedal where you can control the loop aging. You can also control loop volume. And the Infinity's expression pedal input also allows for 0 to 5 volt control voltage signals. So if you're using a modular synthesizer, you can absolutely use those variable voltages to manipulate elements of what's going on with the expression pedal in the Infinity looper. That's some fun stuff. The original Infinity runs on 18 volts. The new one, which I think I dropped on the floor here, oh yes. The new one runs on 9 volts. Under 100 mA. So standard Boss pedal power supply works with the Infinity 2. I hope you go check one out and discover for yourself the infinite joys of looping. I was going to close out today's little talk with just a brief discussion of my rig, what I'm using here. Just give some props to the people that we work with who have been hooking me up with my tone, and just show you some of the sounds that I use. Jeremy, do we have any questions? All right. I think one thing I did fail to mention, I probably should have, is that you can win in one of these pedals. I suppose I was supposed to say that in the beginning. I have failed to mention that if you have watched this far, you probably stand a very good chance now that you know that you can actually win one of these pedals. You just got to post a comment that says why you'd like to win. So yeah, After Infinity 2, you can win one. And so rig-wise, rocking Telecaster Han here, pickups inspired by the Richie Kotzen Telecaster. That man has great tone. So DiMarzio chopper in the bridge gives me a beautiful rock guitar tone. And I believe this one in the neck's called the Twang King, and it's also beautiful. I use them together. Or you can run them in series, 4-way telly. For that darker sound. And so yeah, D'Addario tuner, Origin Effects Cality 76 compressor I've been enjoying lately. Maxon 808 overdrive with the Pigtronix mod. That's my main overdrive. That's what you've been hearing basically this whole time. I usually have that combined with the compressor. So here's the main overdrive sound. And I'll throw in a Vertex Ultraphonics for like a stack sound that's even more lead oriented. The venerable Eventide H9 for all its beautiful chorusing. Leslie's. Shimmer. And a trombone. Pigtronix Resotron, which is a filter that follows the pitch of what you play. I actually love using this one. This is kind of like a wah that follows you. I love that pedal. And then just a little bit of Supro analog delay and a Pigtronix Echolution. One of the ways that you might have heard me talk about this in the past is that I love to use a splitter after my overdrive pedals and send the signal from my gain devices independently into an analog delay, digital delay, whatever, eventide effects, so that all the different modulations are all happening independently and then they get recombined before they go to the looper. And then the loopers last in the chain. I get both infinities plugged in here together, and then we've been playing through just this little 1x10 combo the whole time. This is the Supro 1970 RK Robert Keeley signature model tube amplifier, 25 watts with a pair of 6V6 power tubes and a 10-inch speaker. And that's really my amp of choice for working with effects and pedals. As you could hear, even when I was dumping the sample rate down and doing a low E below the low E string, the thing still holds together beautifully. So that's my rig. I've had a great time. I hope you guys have enjoyed it and got something out of this infinite joy of looping clinic. And if you got any further questions, now would be a good time to ask them because I'm about to be on my way out. Yeah, I suggest that you go down to your local Pigtronix dealer or an online retailer like Bax and discover the meaning of futuristic analog tone. Pigtronix, play Pigtronix and get fat. The Infinity Looper. And the Infinity 2 Double Looper just came out. Enjoy it. Thank you everybody for your time. I'll see you later.